Think you know history's worst disasters? One night in China erased more lives than 150 Titanics combined. In America, women were sealed in lead coffins because their radioactive bones will glow for another 1,600 years. Italy's deadly Messina earthquake. At 5:21 a.m. on December 28, 1908, the residents of Messina, Sicily were sleeping peacefully in their beds. 20 seconds later, half of them were dead. A 7.1 magnitude earthquake had just turned one of Italy's most beautiful port cities into a tomb of brick and stone. But nature wasn't done yet, because Mother Nature said, you know what this disaster needs? A sequel. As survivors stumbled from their crumbling homes, a wall of water 40 feet high was already racing towards the coastline at 120 miles per hour. Some locals later said they heard the sea literally sucking itself backward before it struck, the last sound many of them would ever hear. The numbers were staggering. 80,000 people gone in minutes. Entire streets vanished without a trace. The few buildings left standing caught fire because if an earthquake and tsunami tag team wasn't enough, why not add some flames to really seal the deal? Survivors who dug themselves out of the rubble faced the kind of choice you never want to make. Stay and freeze in the bitter December cold, or try swimming through streets now filled with tsunami water and debris. Yeah, talk about your lose-lose situations. What's truly wild isn't just that this was Europe's deadliest earthquake, it was that it was practically erased from history books. Huh? Well, everyone knows about Pompeii. Barely anyone remembers the day Sicily lost an entire generation and the time it takes to brush your teeth. At least Pompeii left some tourist attractions. The sea swept away the evidence, and time swept away the memory. The Halifax Harbor explosion. 20 minutes. That's how long the people of Halifax had between seeing a burning ship drift into their harbor and experiencing what would become the largest man-made explosion before the atomic bomb. December 6, 1917. Just another morning in Nova Scotia, until it wasn't. The SS Mont Blanc was basically a floating bomb. 2,925 tons of high explosives packed into its hull, because apparently regular cargo ships weren't exciting enough. When it collided with another vessel in the harbor, nobody panicked. Sure, there was a fire, but the crew had abandoned ship and the flames didn't look too bad. Locals even gathered along the waterfront to watch the spectacle. They had no idea they were staring at a ticking time bomb. The blast was equivalent to 2.9 kilotons of TNT. Buildings had vanished within a 1.6-mile radius. The shockwave was felt 100 miles away. Even the fish got their first flying lesson. A tsunami swept survivors into the freezing harbor. The explosion even created a temporary vacuum that sucked the water out of the harbor before sending it crashing back as a 60-foot wave. The final toll? Over 2,000 dead, 9,000 injured, and 25,000 homeless. God, the explosion was so powerful that it remains the largest accidental non-nuclear blast in history. Yeesh, one ship, one collision, one spark, and a city was literally wiped off the map. The poisoning of radium girls. In 1917, U.S. Radium Corporation launched history's deadliest cover-up. They hired young women to paint watch dials with radium paint that glowed in the dark. The technique? Dip the brush in radium, point it with your lips, paint. Hundreds of times a day. They called it lip pointing. Each touch a hidden death sentence. In 1922, Molly Maggio's job began crumbling away. Ugh, the company's response? Yeah, they falsified her death certificate to read syphilis. Okay, better that scandal than admitting they made her bones glow like a Christmas tree. Turns out, you can bury anything if you're willing to get creative with paperwork. The truth was worse. The company knew radium was lethal. Their scientists worked behind lead shields while telling the dial painters the paint was harmless, because nothing says totally safe like hiding behind a wall of lead. When Dr. Harris and Martin linked their deaths to radium poisoning in 1925, U.S. Radium buried his research under a mountain of paid-off experts and false diagnoses. By 1927, Grace Fryer could barely lift her arms to file her lawsuit. Her spine was collapsing from radiation poisoning. The company's response? Yeah, call her a liar, an attention seeker, a hysteric. Oh, the irony. In 1928, the very inventor of their radium paint Dr. Von Tachaki died from radiation exposure because karma, now available in radioactive form. Yeah, well, they buried that story too. The horror continued into the 1940s. Women's teeth falling out, bones shattering at a touch, World War II's demand for glowing watches exposed thousands more before the FDA's 1938 ban on lip pointing. Too little, too late. Today, these women's graves still emit radiation. Their bones will glow for another 1,600 years. The price of corporate greed, sealed in lead-lined coffins across America. Cameroon's Lake Nyos disaster. In the dead of night on August 21, 1986, the residents of Nyos village in Cameroon went to sleep just like any other evening. By sunrise, 1,746 people and over 3,500 animals lay dead in their homes, streets, and fields. Huh? No blood, no wounds, no signs of struggle? Just lifeless bodies scattered across 3 villages within a 16-mile radius. Mother Nature had just pulled off the perfect crime. The killer? Nothing but air. Lake Nyos, a seemingly peaceful crater lake perched above the villages, had been hiding a deadly secret. That night, it suddenly burped out 1.2 million tons of carbon dioxide, an invisible, odorless cloud of death that silently rolled down the mountainside. Heavier than air, this ghostly fog crept into homes while families slept, replacing every breath of oxygen with a lethal blanket of CO2. Big yikes. The few survivors who lived to tell the tale reported feeling dizzy and weak before passing out. When they regained consciousness, they found themselves in a real-life horror scene. Entire families frozen in their final moments, some still in their beds, others collapsed mid-stride as they desperately tried to escape the invisible killer. Scientists later discovered that Lake Nyos sat on a volcanic vent, essentially making it a giant carbonated drink ready to explode. The disaster was so unprecedented that it created an entirely new field of study around these deadly lake eruptions. Because apparently, is this lake gonna burp us to death? Needed to become a legitimate scientific question. China's Banqiao Dam collapse. For 30 years, the Chinese government convinced the world that Typhoon Nina killed 26,000 people in 1975. The truth? They buried the bodies. And the story, deeper than the villages that vanished that night. When classified files finally surfaced in 2005, they reveal history's deadliest structural failure. The Banqiao Dam, built in the 1950s, was promised to withstand a once-in-a-thousand-years flood. But when Typhoon Nina brought over 1,060 millimeters of rain in 3 days, triple the dam's capacity, its floodgates jammed. Bureaucrats wasted precious hours shuffling papers instead of evacuating people. At 1 a.m. on August 8th, the dam gave way. A massive wave over 6 miles wide and traveling at 31 miles per hour, erasing entire villages from existence within hours. Yikes. Survivors described the torrent as a sea of death. The final death toll? Nearly 10 times the official story. 10 million people displaced, 11 million homes destroyed, and up to 240,000 lives lost to flooding, famine, and disease. The Communist Party's response? Nothing to see here, folks, just a little rain, as they label it a natural disaster, and censored all records faster than you can say engineering failure. Because when in doubt, blame the weather. Today, a new dam stands in Banqiao, supposedly safer than ever. But this time, no one's making any 1,000-year promises. Probably because we won't collapse it this week doesn't have quite the same ring to it. The Great Smog Disaster. December 5th, 1952, London committed mass murder and got away with it. The killer? Sulfur-rich coal that powered Britain's post-war industrial boom. The weapon? A toxic cloud that turned the city into a gas chamber. For 5 days, 8 million Londoners inhaled death with every breath, while the government played its favorite game of see no evil, breathe no evil. The official story claimed 4,000 dead. A tragedy, sure, but acceptable collateral damage for economic progress. The real body count? Nearly 12,000 souls. Hospital records mysteriously disappeared. Death certificates conveniently blame pneumonia, tuberculosis, anything but the obvious killer clouding their windows. Cause of death? Definitely not the toxic smog you're breathing right now. So, don't let these stories vanish like those hospital records. Drop a like and subscribe to keep history's darkest secrets circulating. Politicians stalled for 4 years before passing the Clean Air Act. while thousands more died from lung damage. History books reduced it to a footnote right between things we'd rather not talk about and, oops, our bad. Today, the same deadly cocktail kills millions in Delhi, Beijing, and Jakarta. Different cities, same cover-up playbook, because why fix an environmental crisis when you can just pretend you can't see it? Want to know the darkest part? That killer fog in 1952 wasn't London's first mass poisoning, just the one they couldn't hide. The bolus cyclone catastrophe. The deadliest tropical cyclone in recorded history wasn't just a natural disaster. It was a political powder keg that ripped a nation apart. Yikes. On November 13, 1970, as midnight approached the coast of East Pakistan, winds reaching 115 miles per hour drove a massive wall of water inland. No warnings, no evacuations, no chance. The numbers are staggering. Up to 1 million people vanished in a single night. Jeez. Villages disappeared under the surge. The few who made it to high ground watched as everything they knew was swallowed by the darkness. But what happened next was even more shocking. While survivors fought for survival without food or clean water, the Pakistani government's response was a shrug and a yawn. They took their sweet time sending aid, moving with all the urgency of a sloth on sleeping pills. Apparently, their emergency response plan was written on Internet Explorer. And when they did, it was barely a drop in the ocean. The people of East Pakistan got the message loud and clear. Their lives meant nothing to the powers that be. That cyclone? Yeah, it did more than devastate the coast. It exposed the rotting foundation of a divided nation. The rage of the survivors, mixed with years of political neglect, exploded into the Bangladesh Liberation War. Nothing says, "we're breaking up," quite like declaring independence after your government ghosted you during an apocalypse. By 1971, East Pakistan had a new name and a new flag. They were now Bangladesh, born from the waters that nearly drowned them. One night, one storm, 1 million souls, and the birth of a nation built on the backs of those who survived. The Wacky volcanic devastation. On June 8, 1783, Iceland's Wacky fissure ripped open and didn't stop spewing toxic death for 8 straight months. We're talking 122 million tons of sulfur dioxide, enough to turn Europe's skies into a poisonous blue haze so thick that ships had to stay in port. Finally, a legitimate excuse for sailors to stay at the pub. This wasn't your standard volcanic temper tantrum, this was nature's attempt at chemical warfare. The poison rain that followed wasn't just killing crops, it was basically turning the entire food chain into a death sentence. In Iceland, fluorine from the eruption settled on the grass, causing livestock's teeth to rot and bones to crumble before they dropped dead. When desperate farmers ate the contaminated meat, their bones literally started dissolving from the inside out. Ew. Within months, 25% of Iceland's entire population was gone. But Wacky was just warming up. Actually, it was cooling things down, but you get the point. The dry fog spread across Europe felt like a funeral shroud, dropping temperatures by full degrees Celsius globally in Britain alone. 23,000 people choked to death on volcanic gases. The toxic clouds traveled so far, they disrupted India's monsoon seasons, causing unprecedented droughts across Asia. Here's the real kicker. This volcanic apocalypse helped trigger the French Revolution. Turns out, when your crops are dying from acid rain and your people are starving, they're not too keen on watching the monarchy feast. One crack in Iceland's surface had just rewritten the course of human history. China's Tangshan earthquake horror. 3:42 a.m., July 28, 1976. In just 15 seconds, the industrial city of Tangshan transformed from peaceful slumber into hell on earth. No warnings, no chance of escape, a 7.5 magnitude earthquake literally tore the ground apart, pulverizing an entire city of 1 million people. While the world was distracted by the Montreal Olympics, Tangshan was being erased from existence. I guess China didn't want to steal the Olympics spotlight with their own earth-shattering performance. No? 85% of buildings crumble instantly, but the true horror lies in the numbers. While the Chinese government claimed 242,000 dead, independent investigators uncovered a far darker truth. Up to 850,000 lives lost. That's 400,000 deaths simply vanished from official records. The survivors faced weeks of merciless aftershocks, But perhaps the most chilling was the government's response. As desperate families clawed through rubble searching for loved ones, officials systematically blocked all foreign aid, journalists, and assistance. The truth of Tangshan was buried deeper than its victims. It wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a catastrophic failure of infrastructure wrapped in a massive government cover-up, a brutal lesson in earthquake-proof construction, learned at the cost of 250,000 lives, or perhaps many more. Don't let these voices be silenced beneath the rubble of time. Hit like to ensure this story keeps making waves. China's Yellow River Flood. In 1887, China witnessed the deadliest flood in human history, then made it disappear faster than a magic trick. The Yellow River, aptly named China's Sorrow, had transformed into an elevated death trap. Years of sediment buildup forced officials to build higher and higher dikes, essentially creating a massive water highway suspended above fertile farmland. When those neglected walls finally burst that September, they unleashed hell on Earth. The death toll, 2 million souls, more than the atomic bombs, Titanic, and San Francisco earthquake combined. Achievement unlocked. Worst disaster high score. 50,000 square miles, an area the size of England, transformed into a vast, deadly lake within hours. Entire villages disappeared so completely, their names were erased from maps forever. The survivors? They face a fate perhaps worse than drowning. Stranded on treetops and rooftops, they watch helplessly as starvation, exposure, cholera, and dysentery claim those the floodwaters couldn't reach. Mother Nature's version of, if you don't get them on the first try, try again. Their rescue never came. But here's the darkest part. While Victorian London obsessed over Jack the Ripper's 5 victims in 1888, 2 million Chinese deaths went ignored. The crumbling Qing dynasty's failure to act turned a natural disaster into an apocalyptic tragedy. When the dynasty fell in 1911, they took their secrets to the grave. And 2 million people vanished twice. First beneath the waters, and then from history itself. Yikes. If you thought this was intense, wait till you see what's next. The stakes are higher, the chills go deeper, and the twists, they're about to get insane. You'll want to be there for every second. I'll see you there.